All right, good morning. This is day 3 of our lecture series for Honors United States History. I'm Dr. Thompson, and I'm recording to you live from a hospital. And so, yes, the baby is here. I'll give you all of the updates and stuff like that later on. But, I guess when I see you all in person, because that's personable information. However, let's get started with this lecture. So, we got Leon Bass. He was the answer to your bell ringer today. He was the Black World War II hero that liberated the first set of Jews from the Buchenwald concentration camp. He just so happened to have lived and served or volunteered in Florida. He also was involved in the Battle of Bulge, to which we met today. Milton S.J. Wright, as you should have watched in your video for your assignment from today. He also served as one of the first African Americans to have interviewed, or the only African Americans to have interviewed Adolf Hitler at his time at reign of power and or terror, however you want to put it, and while he was in. So starting another section we began already, and I plan to finish this section today. America moved towards war. You have the cash and carry that Roosevelt passed as he was going into his third term of a presidency. His provisions said that he would be able to provide these things for any nations that were at war. So he kind of changed his Neutrality Act idea. That leads to the Axis powers, which was Germany, Italy, and Japan. And FDR wins his third term. Why? Because many people in America was like, we don't want to change presidents during a time of war. He wins with a landslide victory. That leads to the Lend-Lease Act, which meant the United States would lend and lease arms to nations whose defense was vital to America. So he's not sending soldiers during this time period. What he's sending is, guns and money. He's allowing to loan money to his allies and guns to this point. U.S. begins to support Stalin after Hitler lied and, kind of went against their old non-aggression pact that they wouldn't invade each other. He ended up sending torpedoes to the USSR and through the something called the German U-boat, like a submarine boat. And so basically, Stalin switched sides and joined the Allies, which was a good thing because that would have meant that America and Britain would have had to fight against this very powerful Germany and Japan. So now it's like a 3-on-2 versus, well, and you also have Italy. But they weren't as, if I could say, as big of a power as the as Germany and Japan. So they meet secretly at the Atlantic Charter out at sea, where FDR and Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, they meet to come up with the terms of what to do after the war, which leads us to the League of Nations, which was supposed to prevent another World War III. However, or we know that there has been multiple amount of wars that have occurred um, within Europe and within other nations across the. Japan attacks the United States. Japan launched an attack on American naval bases early on this morning of December 7th, 1941. Japan bombed the largest American naval base, Pearl Harbor. This is the single event that forced America into fighting World War II. So just some information again, we went over yesterday. The attacks killed about 2,400 and wounds about 1,200. Uh, and so America declares war and eventually declares war on Germany. So the people that helped us fight, Women's Auxiliary Army Corps. These women worked in non-combative roles such as nurses, ambulance drivers, radio operators, and uh, skipping some of the stuff that you will probably only see as extra credit. Mobilization of scientists. In 1941, FDR created the Office of Scientific Research and Development, the OSRD, to bring scientists into the war. And their focus was, just on, radar and sonar, but so many other things came out of this organization or department, if you will. When we had penicillin and pesticides, that some of the pesticides would do more harm than good later on, especially when we talk about um, when we move into the Vietnam or Korean War, particularly the Vietnam War, and how they would, use it, and how it became highly flammable, and foods were, remember we talked about way, way, way back in Civil War. If an army can't eat, they can't fight. And so they would use these different type of pesticides that one would think would do away with the, um, which would be a good thing, do away with the insects and pests that might destroy crops. However, you can modify that and make it into a weapon, and that's exactly what. USS Gulf America, an American steam tanker, German U-boat sunk her in Jacksonville, Florida, in 1942. This is the closest that the war had gotten to American soil, but it did get to American waters. And for this is just one of the instances to which it got close to American waters. I'm talking about it because it's in Florida. We are in Florida. The Manhattan Project. This is where they're beginning to develop the atomic bomb. And the nickname was the Manhattan Project. It was tested all over the United States, but I think some of the scientists come from Manhattan. So the War Production Board, the WPB, decided which companies would convert to wartime production and how to best allocate raw materials to those industries. This is the exact same thing that happened with World War One, as it relates to who is going to produce what, like meatless Mondays and wheatless Wednesdays and stuff like that. Just trying to move the war or mobilize the American people towards being prepared. You had the collection drives, thing. Battle of Stalingrad. This is where we left off yesterday. Hitler wanted to wipe out Stalingrad, Russia, which was a major industrial center. Now that they are enemies during this formidable war, and in the summer of 1942, the Germans took offensive in the southern Soviet Union. By the winter of 1943, the Allies began to see victories on land as well as sea. This was a huge turning point in the war because it showed again that Germany can be defeated, and not just in the air as the Battle of Britain, um, which one could easily say that Germany still kind of won. They just didn't take the country, but they killed enough men to make Britain back off. But Britain also showed that they were able to fight, and we can turn Germany away. And but this battle here, not only did Germany get turned away, but Germany was defeated. Like they literally was like, "Oh, we got to go and retreat. We have to go and find more soldiers. We got to do all of these things." So this was a big deal. Battle of Stalingrad. Again, I'm not a big battle person, so we won't be talking about a whole lot of things. But why we ended up winning the Battle of Stalingrad, for weeks, Germans had pressed into Stalingrad. Then winter set in, and Germans were wearing summer uniforms, which is very interesting because if you are familiar with world history, you know that that's what happened with Napoleon Bonaparte when he invaded Russia, and so wasn't prepared for the weather. And so the Germans surrendered around January 1943. The Soviets had lost more than 1 million men in battle, more than twice the number of deaths the United States suffered in all the war at a time. Just some other interesting photos. Poor doggy here. In some places, they were not able to feed the dog, so they were getting the dogs up. Tuskegee Airmen, on a lighter note. Among the brave men who fought in Italy were pilots of the all black 99th Squadron, or the Tuskegee Airmen. Make sure you underline, highlight, put a star next to it, you'll see it again. The pilots made numerous effective airstrikes against Germany and won distinguished unit citations, meaning they won some awards as a unit for their. Here's some pictures of them. The original Black Panthers. This is something I'm pretty sure you know because there's a movie about the red tails, or these the other guys or whatever. Um, but there aren't any movies about where outside of the Marvel and the Civil Rights Group. Most people don't know organization come from? The original Black Panthers was the 761st Tank Battalion, nicknamed the Black Panthers for the logo to which they chose. And it was predominantly black. And they fought in Germany and in France. Even the professional athlete Jackie Robinson, to which we will talk about in a little more detail in the Civil Rights Movement unit. But this is, he was even one of the most rewarded fighters for this particular 761st Tank Battalion. There he is in uniform, both baseball and his World War II attire. All right, A. Philip Randolph. Thought we was gonna get away from this guy. Remember, we learned about him with the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, and the labor unionists and things like that. It's not gonna be the last time we learn about this resident of Crescent City, Florida, and he helped pass the integration laws for the military, which was the Executive Order of 8802. And the story goes that this was the first integration. Excuse me. This was the first March on Washington that never happened. That's usually how the story is told, and I'll be very brief. Is that basically he called FDR and told him, he said, you should pass these laws to get some of the war industries integrated, to get some of the African Americans and minorities some of these jobs. And so basically, FDR hangs up the phone, doesn't even want to finish the conversation. So A. Philip Randolph calls back using the technology of the day. He uses three-way, and he's on the phone now with, like, say, Chicago NAACP branch and another branch. But thank you though. Thank you so much, man. So basically, what ends up happening is another. So A. Philip Randolph is on the phone with another guy, NAACP from Chicago, and he asks, "Hey, you know, how many of you all got coming down to march on Washington in the morning? Oh, we got like 5 buses." Then the next guy goes, and FDR is like, "I call your bluff. Don't believe him." Hangs up the phone. So A. Philip Randolph calls back again. Now he's talking to New York. He says, "Hey, New York, how many guys you got coming down?" "Oh, we got about 6 buses. We're waiting on you to tell us when to come." So this time, A. Philip Randolph hangs up, calls the president back. Now he's on three-way with, like, San Francisco. "Hey, how many buses you all got coming up? We halfway on, we got other than half on the way there. You just need to call them, stop them somewhere else, da da da." So basically, they were already prepared to send about 1,000, 2,000 people to come and sit on the White House lawn and protest to get these jobs for the military. But FDR was like, "Hold on, tell them not to come, tell them to wait, don't come. I'm going to pass this law." And literally the next morning, he passed the law integrating the military services. So it was like the March on Washington that never happened. It's 442 Regimental Combat Team, a Japanese American fighting in World War II. They fought in Germany, Italy, and France. And they did not fight in Japan, because I think that would have been like a conflict of interest, as most historians can agree. And so, yes, we had some agents in there. We'll talk about what happened to some of the agents while they were in America. That's for another time. Hispanics and Latinos during World War II. Make sure you get the title and get what's green. Between 400,000 and 500,000 Hispanics served in the United States Armed Forces during World War II. The exact number of Hispanics that served is unknown, because they were counted as white, and even if they didn't want to be counted as such. Because of the lack of documentation, the total number of Hispanics who died in World War II will never be known. But we can only thank them for their services. The 201st Fighter Squadron, called the Aztec Eagles. These were Mexican fighters squadron in the Air Force. They were composed only of about 300 volunteers. They trained in the United States, but they fought on behalf of Mexico for the Allies. They've primarily fought against Japan, and so which was the Japanese Air Force was pretty a big deal during World War II. They were probably more, you know, deadly, to say the very least, than the German Air Force. So thank them for that. Taking back France, as you can see, even as the Allies were battling for Italy, They began plans on dramatic invasion of France. Operation Overlord, also called D-Day. Underline highlight, put a star next to that, is when the British troops take France back from a Nazi control. And so this was set for June 6, 1944. The commander of this was the future president of the United States, Dwight D. Eisenhower. He comes in after Truman. So D-Day, you probably want to get the notes, or want to just get that as a note. You don't necessarily have to get the title. It was just the same thing. When the D-Day happened, is when the British and the United States helped take back France from Germany, and this was the largest land, sea, air operation in military history. Despite air support, German retaliation was brutal, especially at Omaha Beach. Within a month, the Allies had landed 1 million troops, 567,000 tons of supplies, and 170,000 vehicles. And so, like, this was mobilization, and this was one thing that they knew that we only had one shot to do, and they do it. The Germans lost at Normandy, which is another battle, may have been because of a birthday party. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel was in charge of defending Europe from Allied invasion in 1944. Rommel took the weekend of June 6th off to celebrate his wife's birthday. It was that day that the Allies landed at Normandy, leading to the largest German defeat of World War II. You might know it better as D-Day. So again, if you kind of like hear things in the background, it's because my wife is in the other room, and I am recording in the not hotel, but hospital lobby. So just be cool, and you can always press pause and rewind this lecture to move on and learn whatever else you need to learn. Here's some gruesome photographs from D-Day. This gentleman is clearly missing a head. um, a German soldier who got his arm blown off, like literally there, that's his body, there's his arm. Um, FDR wins again. So, that was 38 election. Now we're in 40, 44 election. FDR wins again. September 1944, the Allies had freed France, Belgium, and Luxembourg. That's good news. Make sure you get the title and get what's green. And the American people desire not to change horses midstream. So the same reason why he won a third term as president is the same reason why he won a fourth term as president. He helped elect FDR to an unprecedented fourth term. So the Battle of the Bulge. Leon Bass had fought in this battle, the black guy who helped liberate one of the first Nazi concentration camps or death camps. And so in October 1944, Americans captured this first German city, Action, defeating the Nazi army for good. So Hitler responded with one last ditch massive offensive, but the Germans lost it. And so Hitler hoped breaking through the Allied line would break the supply. Didn't work. The Battle of the Bulge was the Germans' last chance. At this point, basically the Nazis can really do nothing. Allies take Berlin, and Hitler commits suicide. Him and his wife, Eva Braun, who was like an actress and movie director, if I'm not mistaken, and a model or something like that. He wrote a death note or whatever, basically blaming the Jews for starting World War II, and then he had his wife take a cyanide pill, and he shot himself in the head. And this is the photograph of him and his wife. This was supposed to be the supermodel, and then this is one of the last photographs of Adolf Hitler alive, taken on April 30th, 1905. So this is supposed to be of the photo. Yeah, but I know one of my students in particular will find this information interesting. Pictures of the same person. Some people believe that Adolf Hitler had a doppelganger, or at least he had someone who he would follow him around or do orders for him, and and be in public for him when he actually wasn't there. It's just one of those funny things. It's not even necessarily a conspiracy theory. I think most sane people and academically sound people can agree that he is definitely not with us on Earth anymore. So yeah, but I found this interesting and wanted to share. Um, it's funny because even some of the newspapers didn't quite understand what happened back then. Like they was like, "Oh, Hitler killed in battle." This was in an actual newspaper. The reality is that he took himself out, and so here we are. Here's the joke. The Yalta Conference in February 1945 as Oh, in February 1945, as Allies pushed toward victory in Europe, and ailing FDR met with Churchill and Joseph Stalin of the USSR, Churchill of the Great Britain, at the Black Sea resort at the Yalta in USSR. So they actually met in Russia. A series of compromises were worked out concerning things. Get the title, get the two things that's bullet. So what did they come up with at the Yalta Conference or the Yalta Agreement? USSR, Britain, and the United States agreed to divide Germany into four occupied zones after the war. So they was going to take the land that Germany took, the people that Germany, or people that accepted Germany taking them over, and divide them up again. So this is exactly like what happened with the 14 points after World War II. After World War One, with the exception that they were going to at least invite some of the old other uh, Germans to the table, which at least helps them to negotiate the terms, especially after surrender. And then Stalin agreed to free elections in Eastern Europe, which, spoiler alert, you fast forward, in some of these areas, even by today, they don't have really free elections. Russia has a leader for life in Vladimir Putin. So he made himself, or he continuously gets reelected and reelected and reelected. They don't have any, laws against people running for more than one term in office, just like the United States at the time didn't, but eventually were put in place. And then so Stalin agreed to help the United States in the war against Japan and to join the United Nations, to which they did. And so two of the three of those things were true. And so this was the day after the Yalta conference. Notice everyone's special attire. So victory in Europe Day. General Eisenhower, future president of the United States, accepted unconditional surrender of the Third Reich. That empire that was supposed to last for 1,000 years didn't even last 20. On May 8th, 1945, the Allies celebrated VE Day, or Victory in Europe Day. The war in Europe was finally over. And so, sadly, FDR passed away. He did not have the opportunity to see victory in Europe. He died of a stroke, but his vice president, Harry S. Truman, now becomes the 33rd president of the United States. Make sure you get that. You definitely will be asked about it. We're going to go for at least two more minutes. So you have the Battle of Coral Sea. I'll just pause. Happy weekend. Yes, you're welcome. Right. All right, so you had the Battle of Coral Sea. Make sure you get the title, get the green text. The main Allied forces in the Pacific were Americans and Australians. In May 1942, they succeeded in stopping the Japanese drive towards Australia in a 5-day battle at Coral Sea. This was the most significant naval battle in World War II to defeat Japan. Now remember, the Japanese Navy was pretty strong, but their Air Force was even stronger. And so, for us to have protected another one of our allies, which kind of like a small ally to say the least, but an ally nonetheless, was Australia. That led us to the Battle of Midway, which was, it's a lot up there to write. However, what for the read, but what you need is just what's green. So the Battle of Midway was actually in the Philippines. So shout out to my Filipino students. And so Japan, or at least outside or in the air of the Philippines, Japan's next thrust was towards Midway Islands, a strategic island northwest of Hawaii. Admiral Chester Nimitz, the commander of the American Naval Force in the Pacific, moved to defend the island. The Americans won a decisive victory as their planes destroyed four Japanese aircraft carriers and 250 planes. This was a major Air Force victory for Japan to defeat the Allies. And so, Battle of Midway was a turning point in the war. Soon, Allies were island hopping. And kamikaze pilots, kamikaze pilots attacked the Allies. They would literally give their lives. They would submit suicide, and just kind of take their planes and crash into Americans as Americans was trying to approach the islands in the Philippines so that they would defeat them. And there's some shoes that's named Kazi. So that leads me to our last slide for today. Iwo Jima. Iwo Jima. This was the next, or excuse me, next the Allies turned to the islands of Iwo Jima. The island was critical to the Allies as a base for an attack on Japan. You've probably seen parody of this in movies and cartoons, this image here, but it was called the most heavily defended spot on Earth. Allied and Japanese forces suffered heavy casualties. So we will pick up from here on tomorrow. Make sure you get with the classwork. Have a great day. Learn something.